Alright, I'm having a lot of trouble with this. You guys are just gonna have to stick with me. I think I'm getting a cold or something. I'm losing my voice. But also, it just occurred to me that this is the third consecutive sequel I've talked about. That was not on purpose, but I probably could have advertised it or something. It's been more than half a decade since my original video on Sonic the Hedgehog arguably kicked off the current incarnation of my channel. So long ago, in fact, that I recently felt the need to revisit the title and give it more modern coverage. In part, of course, so I could talk about the Christian Whitehead re-release that's now available on consoles and PC, but also just as a way to set myself up to finally complete some of the follow-up games that I've never taken a look at. Namely, all of them. That last video was more than just a fresh playthrough of Sonic 1 though. It was also meant to serve as a deep dive into my thoughts on Sonic Origins, the latest compilation Sega has been predatorily shoving down everybody's throats by delisting any other option you may have previously had to play the classic series. I specifically had it set up that way because, well, for one, believe it or not, it's actually very possible to form all the thoughts you need to have on this compilation after completing just one game, but also because by getting all of that nonsense out of the way in my revisit video, I could jump straight in right after with more streamlined videos on the games I had yet to play. For that reason, this is going to be a standalone video on Sonic the Hedgehog 2. We'll obviously be talking a little bit about Origins where relevant, but if that kind of thing interests you, or you just want to watch in order, I highly recommend checking out my coverage of Sonic 1 before coming back here. Lastly, to address a small elephant in the room, yes, from a story perspective, the direct follow-up to the original Sonic the Hedgehog is actually Sonic CD, with Sonic 2 coming after it in the timeline. This is how Sonic Origins has them laid out, and it's also more or less the order they were developed in, so naturally a lot of people choose to play them in this order as well. I don't subscribe to that kind of degenerate lifestyle though, because I play games in the only order that matters, release order, and in every region of the world, even if only by a month or so, Sonic 2 was released before Sonic CD. That's why we're going to be saving CD for next time, and I'm going to be giving you my official take on Sonic the Hedgehog 2. The plot of Sonic 2 is fairly straightforward. In fact, it's almost a direct rehashing of the first game. The evil Dr. Ivo Robotnik is looking to get his hands on the mysterious and powerful Chaos Emeralds, which now number 7 after an additional one inexplicably apparated into existence. He's hoping to use them to power his legally distinct space station and take over the world. Presumably we would know more about this thing if we had played Sonic CD, but you can take that up with Sega. In order to help him on his mission, Robotnik has once again captured the adorable inhabitants of West Island and transformed them into dastardly badniks, leaving it up to Sonic and his new friend Tails the Fox, who also inexplicably apparated at the beginning of the game, to gather all 7 Chaos Emeralds, defeat Dr. Robotnik, and save the world. The Genesis game of course leaves all of this useful exposition in the manual, but unlike the first game, even in Origins we don't get so much as an animatic explaining this all to us on first boot. Instead, we get to see the story of how Sonic and Tails met, which basically just boils down to Tails saw Sonic and thought he looked cool, so he started following him, I guess. Whatever though, it's good enough to get us in game, where you once again take control of Sonic for a 2D platforming extravaganza. To the surprise of presumably no one, in terms of the basics, this title plays almost identically to its predecessor. You'll still have the ability to speed along, jump, and roll into a spiky ball to make yourself deadly to enemies. In terms of changes, Sonic 2's killer app is the Spin Dash, allowing you to instantly gain a huge burst of speed from a stagnant starting point. You may remember that this was retroactively added to Sonic 1 for its remaster, but this is where it actually debuted, and it's obviously been a staple ever since. It's seriously nice to be able to gain some quick speed when you need it. It's basically a quality of life feature, allowing you to take on those weird missing middle slopes you can't just walk up more easily, as well as propel yourself forward in ball form to take out certain enemies. As far as other mechanics go, we're still operating on the ring system, one of the first game's revolutionary innovations whereby the rings you collect act as your health. You drop all of them when you die, but as long as you have even one, you can sustain a hit. You'll also be able to occasionally stumble across boxes that will grant you power-ups like a shield, temporary invincibility, or super speed. Using all of these delightful systems, it'll be your responsibility to make your way across 10 and a half zones-ish, defeating an all-new assortment of badniks and interacting with never-before-seen set pieces. Straight off the rip, this game looks really nice. As I've said a million times before, I'm a huge fan of the pixel art aesthetic, and the 16-bit era is easily one of my favorites. The first title was definitely nice looking, but Sonic 2 absolutely does laps around it, with significantly more detailed backgrounds, vibrant colors, and much more varied visual themes as compared to some of the more monotonous areas of Sonic 1. Mystic Cave Zone and the outdoor areas of Hilltop Zone, for instance, stand out as a couple of shining examples, at least visually. And of course, it's all now being presented in glorious 16:9 thanks to the remaster. Seeing as how this is is a franchise known for its music, it should probably go without saying that Sonic 2 is also an absolute feast for the ears, with a soundtrack that is nearly beyond reproach. A lot of these songs have gone down in gaming history as all-time classics. You've probably heard them before if you watch much YouTube, and they feel right at home back in their original context. A couple of other things have also been shaken up, structurally speaking. Each zone, for instance, is now only 2 acts long instead of the original 3. I don't really have a particularly strong opinion as to whether this is a good or bad change, honestly, but most people seem to really like it, so it bears pointing out. It's also notable because it coincides with a fairly major change for us completionists. The special stage system has been completely reworked. It might seem like I'm pointing this out a little prematurely, and admittedly this is the kind of thing I would usually save for last, but for various reasons, we need to get it out of the way now before we can move on to other gameplay elements. If you want to get the good ending and 100% complete the game, you'll need to gather all now 7 of the mysterious and powerful Chaos Emeralds. You can do this by completing special stages, which are accessed by passing through a checkpoint gate with 50 rings or more. These stages are completely different from their incarnation in the first title, taking place in a weird simulated 3D environment with the camera directly behind you. You'll be placed in this half pipe or tube and forced to automatically run forward like an auto-scroller. You're able to move left and right to change your position in the tube, with your objective being to collect enough rings to pass through 3 progressively stricter gates. This on its own is not a terrible idea. Collecting rings is satisfying, and while auto-scrollers are definitely controversial, this is kind of more of an auto-runner, a genre which does have its fans. It's at least more intuitive than the spinning mazes of the first game. Here's the problem. It sucks. These bonus stages are like legitimately terrible. The main problem is just that you can't see far enough ahead of you to know where you need to position yourself. Not only do you need to collect a vast majority of the rings in order to progress, but you also need to avoid these spiked balls that will cause you to lose rings, and the whole thing just seems perfectly set up to induce the hit every stair on the way down effect. You suffer one misinput, and you're not just missing a couple of rings, you're uncontrollably dodging the next 30 rings with ninja level precision. There are no invincibility frames either, so you hit one of those spikes by half a millimeter and it's registering 6 or 7 times. Not that any of that matters anyway, the margins on some of these gates are so tight that missing even a single patch or two means you're basically screwed. Falling even a ring short on any of the gates means that you fail the stage and are kicked back out to the checkpoint post. And if you were playing the base game, that would be it. Better luck next time. Fortunately, we're playing Origins, and it applies the same band-aid solution as it did the first time. You can now spend coins, which are functionally infinite, in order to retry bonus stages. It's much more needed here, as without this ability, it's much more likely that today's upload would have been a memorial slideshow for yours truly. But ultimately, this does very little to temper the unbridled fury I feel whilst having to play these stages. Congratulations, Sonic Team! You've unlocked the rare ability to make me rage, something I'm not exactly prone to doing. It's just trial and error. There's no way to do it that isn't just slamming yourself into each level over and over again until you eventually memorize the location of every object on the course. It's ridiculous, and it isn't enjoyable in the slightest. I hated these challenges so much that they actually made me put down the game twice over the course of a couple of attempted playthroughs because I got too frustrated to continue. The good news is, if you're persistent, these don't last throughout too much of the game. Yeah, unlike in the first title, you can enter a bonus level at any of the multiple checkpoint posts in a given act, meaning that it's technically possible to collect all of the Chaos Emeralds by the end of the second act. That's why I had to bring this up so early, because for a persistent completionist, this fact significantly impacts gameplay throughout the rest of your adventure. Believe it or not, this isn't a thankless task, as having all 7 emeralds collected as well as 50 rings in your inventory will give Sonic the ability to go Super Saiyan, something that they apparently just got away with. As Super Sonic, in addition to faster movement speed, you're also completely invincible, meaning it's basically an instant win button if you can manage to activate it, except for the instances where it isn't. We'll cover that later on. This is obviously a super cool bonus, even as somebody who considers completion to be its own reward. It's still a pretty great feeling to be given something that will make your playthrough easier in exchange for doing something that most players won't. As you can imagine though, having this thing unlocked kind of recontextualizes how you approach acts. See, I don't like the idea of having to get up to or maintain a certain number of rings. It completely defeats the purpose of the ring system, whereby you only need 1 to sustain a hit. You lose basically all of your rings if you take damage, meaning if you need to have a certain number at any given point, you have to do essentially everything leading up to it damageless. That was my biggest complaint about the bonus stages in the first title. I didn't like having to complete an act with 50 rings because it felt too fickle and anxiety inducing, and it sucked all of the fun out of the level. I was happy to be able to get them over with early and move on to the later stages where I no longer had to worry about rings. In Sonic 2 though, while it seems like this may have been mitigated a little at first by allowing you to finish the bonus stages much earlier, with the introduction of Supersonic, the problem now follows you all the way through the final act. Your primary objective is no longer to engage with a challenging but enjoyable platforming stage, but rather to collect 50 rings as quickly as possible so you can hold right and win without engaging with the remainder of the actual level. Granted, I would probably take more issue with this if engaging with the actual level was enjoyable. Yeah, so I actually want to take a moment to reach out to the Sonic 2 dev team directly. I really want to ask, this is a genuine question, I expect an answer to this. Was this game supposed to be fun? Like, actually, because, when I play it, that's not really the vibe that I get. Sonic 2 legitimately does not come off like you're meant to enjoy the levels that you're playing. Almost every issue that I had in small quantities towards the end of the original title has been magnified 12-fold here. It's not that this is a particularly hard game, or that the level design is particularly unfair, it just feels mean-spirited. The enemy placement in some of these acts is just noxious. There are many examples, just off the top of my head, of some kind of trap or piece of stage design for which the only logical explanation I can think of is that the developers were trying to screw you over. You're welcome to be into whatever you want, but to me there's not really anything particularly compelling about losing progress or the rings that I'm apparently required to hoard to a stage element that was intentionally designed to trick you, in that the only way to avoid it is to just somehow magically know that in this specific instance you're supposed to do the opposite of what's intuitive. It's the same way with instant kill traps. Obviously lots, if not most, platformers have some form of instant kill obstacles, but the way they're used in Sonic is just irritating because they aren't consistent with them. Most levels don't have any, and they're not clearly choreographed, so like 95% of pits are safe, dropping you down to a lower part of the course or giving you access to some miscellaneous loot, and then one will just randomly kill you. And don't even get me started on the crushing. I understand why getting squished by two objects moving closer together is a mechanic, it exists in lots of games, but why in God's name is it possible for me to get crushed by two objects moving farther apart? The entire campaign just feels like a series of escalating troll faces from the design team. I enjoyed Casino Night Zone, which does not have any enemies in it, and Hilltop Zone was pretty okay. Besides that, I'm a simple man. I'm playing Oil Ocean Zone, I'm probably mad, or at the very least, lost. I guess we have to talk about Metropolis Zone 2. What were they thinking? Why is it 3 acts? It isn't even the last zone in the game. I legitimately cannot think of a single scenario in which this was done for any reason other than generally increasing the amount of ambient suffering in the universe. Not even Supersonic saves this botched medical procedure of an area. They make you ride these long corkscrew elevators that are weirdly hard to get off of at high speeds, and they don't give you access to like any rings, so you miss a couple of jumps and you're out of power and out of health. It's nauseating. Then the final zone starts with an auto-scroller. How was I supposed to know that I was supposed to jump off of this plane mid-cutscene? Anyway, you would hope that maybe the boss fights would be a saving grace in this title, but in reality they're just kind of mediocre. Just like in the first game, each zone ends with one, and a couple of them are pretty decent, but then several of them are just much more annoying than anything else. That's all before you get to the final boss fight though, and oh boy is it a doozy. Alright, it gets its own stage. Good start, I like it. You don't get any rings, which feels kind of cheap, but the first game was like that too, and it was fine. You're fighting Metal Sonic, an interesting enemy. All things considered, it's a easy enough fight. We'll just head through this door, presumably to victory, and... why do people do this? Why do developers think that I will enjoy having to do 2 separate, unrelated boss fights back-to-back and damageless? This fight is ridiculous. You're not allowed to touch the metal spikes on his arms, but when they're tangible and at what angles is entirely arbitrary. There are absolutely no intuitive visual cues, and the margins are so tiny. And every time you die in this fight, you have to redo the Metal Sonic battle, and wait for the doors to open, and wait for the Death Egg to raise up, and then you mistime the first jump, and you have to start over again! This fight isn't that bad if you just look up a YouTube video, so you know that you can get 2 cheap shots in at the beginning, and you can study exactly how many hits are viable and when, and somebody just tells you where to stand on screen so you don't get hit by his projectile attacks. But can you imagine having to do this fight, no guides, just unadulterated random trial and error, with limited lives and continues, at risk of having to start the entire game over again? This fight sucks. At least you get to fly on your own as Supersonic at the end if you have him unlocked. Oh, so you don't need any rings now. Isn't that convenient? Why is this cutscene in black and white? Anyway, ordinarily this would be where things would start to wrap up, but I knew going in that there was going to be more involved for me. So for a little context, Sonic 2 was the first game in the franchise to offer multiple playable characters, something that was obviously backported to the original Sonic the Hedgehog for Origins. With just the base game, you could play as either Sonic, Sonic and Tails, or notably, just Tails, giving us our first real chance for an alternate playstyle. Flash forward, and Sonic 3 gets its And Knuckles DLC released, which, using lock-on technology, in addition to adding like the second half of the game, adds Knuckles as a playable character in Sonic 3. More interestingly though, the same thing also works in Sonic 2, meaning you can play as Knuckles there as well, which again was carried over for Origins. Finally, as we talked about last time, Sega, in a knockdown, drag-out attempt to wrestle as much of your hard-earned money out of your hands as possible, released a $10 DLC for Origins, adding Amy Rose as a playable character in every included title. With that in mind, we now have a situation where I need to do 3 additional playthroughs if I want to experience the entirety of the game, which I was already anticipating going in. These playthroughs are not that radically different, all things considered. Last time around I noted that they were all in some way easier than the Sonic playthrough. This time around though, that doesn't apply as much because Super Sonic is so overpowered that it makes more sense to just use it rather than try to cheese some platforming with Knuckles Glide or something. You can still go Super as other characters, by the way, except Tails for some reason. We'll talk about that more later. You just don't get a cool alternate sprite, so it's a fair bit lamer. Amy's hammer makes boss fights a little easier, but it's honestly much more trouble than it's worth in most contexts, and it seems like courses in this entry are designed in such a way that they're a lot less likely to be cheesable by gliding or flying. If anything, Knuckles is slightly harder to play as because he can't jump as high, which makes the already ridiculous final boss fight even more infuriating. You have to learn an entirely new method of attack if you want a chance at emerging victorious, and I was going to include the number of attempts it took me in this script, but it ended up being so many that I don't feel like counting them, so be content knowing that it took me over an hour just to beat this boss again. That should have been the end of things. After all, I did a playthrough as each character. That's it, right? Sure, there are separate entries on the home screen depending on whether or not you play with Tails, but those are like difficulty options. You just pick the hardest one and you're good, yeah? Except no, because it wasn't until I finished my second campaign that I realized that this game keeps track of which profiles you've completed, displaying it proudly for the world to see, and I'm not healthy, so if I want to ever have as much as a hope of getting 8 hours of sleep at night, I have to do 3 more full playthroughs of Sonic 2. I don't want to play this game anymore. That's fine though. That's fine, because now I should have no problem absolutely plowing through Classic Mode, Origin solution for those of us who want to play the original incarnation of the game, with limited lives and continues and a 4:3 aspect ratio. I declared this to be necessary last time because Anniversary Mode is such a joke in terms of leniency, and they give you 0 options as far as customizing its rule set. Obviously, having done 7 playthroughs of Sonic 2, Classic Mode gave me no issues, but having completed it, I can at least feel like I've now experienced the Genesis original. There's only one problem. So I did 3 more playthroughs of Classic Mode. And then I got to move on to the Challenge Mode. Just like last time, we have an assortment of short micro-challenge stages that span in difficulty from 1 to 5 stars, and in order to receive full credit, I don't know, you'll have to S-rank each of them by completing the given task within certain parameters. None of these are very difficult, aside from the 5-star ones. They're fine. Some of them are kind of cool, most of them are pretty unremarkable. The Sky Chase Zone auto-scroller challenge legitimately made me want to cry. It's not fun. It's not fun. Reconsidering everything I thought I knew about myself. I don't like it. I don't want to have to play this anymore. I don't want to try again. This was made by Satan! It should go without saying, if you've watched the first video, that the achievements in this title are abysmal. Like I said, I already covered everything in detail, but essentially, they don't actually require you to do anything even remotely approaching 100%. They really call attention to it as well. The game is littered with visible percentages that do not have to be engaged with or filled for you to have the game show as complete on your profile. Essentially, all you have to do to satisfy the Sonic 2 portion of the compilation is beat the game in any mode and S-rank 10 of the challenges in challenge mode, which will get you roughly into to blindfolded and with both hands tied behind your back territory if you choose to do the 10 easiest ones. You don't have to collect any of the Chaos Emeralds or do any of the bonus stages, you don't have to play Classic Mode or do any alternate playthroughs unless you just hate yourself. The closest they get is that there is actually an achievement for transforming into Supersonic, which you would think means that you would at least have to 100% one Sonic 2 save, but spoiler alert, other games in this collection include Supersonic, so no, actually, not really. Shockingly though, I think the much more pertinent piece of information here is just that this isn't a very fun game in my opinion. It doesn't feel like it's supposed to be fun. It was designed by sadists or something. To be clear, it's not like this is an incredibly difficult title or anything. It's really not. You can beat it in a handful of hours even as a noob if you put your mind to it. It's just that everything from the sneaky enemy placement to the weird obsession with instant kill traps to the crappy applications of the ring system make this entry just obnoxious to play. I died in a cutscene once. I don't even know how that's possible. A lot of Sonic games suffer from what people like Exoparadigm Gamer refer to as the Sega learning curve, a phenomenon where certain titles will be unintuitive or even off-putting to newcomers, but will reveal themselves to have incredibly enjoyable mechanics and designs on subsequent playthroughs as a persistent player becomes more familiar with its quirks and intricacies. The original game was like this, kind of, but Sonic 2 just never had that for me. Sure, I've memorized the bonus stages now. I can do them on my first try. I'll be carrying the skill around with me when I'm 95 years old. I can beat the Death Egg robot with relative ease, build a statue of me, but that doesn't magically make any of it compelling or any less arbitrary. The only way to play this game is in an agitatedly paranoid state. Even by campaign 10, I was still walking around just waiting for the moment some unavoidable threat the design team thought would be funny would pop out of the shadows and steal my precious rings. I thought that maybe my 2 Tails playthroughs would be better. Coming back to that, Tails Can't Go Super could be a more compelling way to play, but no, I basically just cheese my way through on the ring system and invincibility frames instead because the level design is so agitating that it doesn't bear engaging with in good faith. This is a title that has all of the hallmarks of being better than its predecessor. It's visually gorgeous, auditorily stunning, and it introduced a wide variety of cool new quality of life mechanics that you would think would make it a shoe-in for best in the series so far. Unfortunately, I just didn't like it, and for that reason, it's hard to recommend outside of its historical value. For what it's worth though, I guess it's not actually that huge of a commitment, and since Origins is now basically the only option in terms of displaying the game proudly on your profile, there are definitely worse ways to play. I'm not sure that I would call myself proud, but I now have it on my list of 100% completed games. I barely even talked about Origins and this video is still almost 25 minutes long. I need to be studied by scientists. Anyway, Supersonic says that only cool kids can like this video and subscribe to my channel, and that only the elite top 1% of completionists will ring the bell so that they never miss a future upload. He also says that you should leave a comment down below so that you can let me know what you think about Sonic 2, Sonic Origins, the Sonic franchise, anything you like. I'd love to hear from you. Finally, Supersonic says that you should follow me on all of my social media. That's conveniently linked in the description below, along with any of the music that I used in this video. I think he's full of crap though, so I'm going to point out that we have been seeing absolutely insane growth recently, and I am so excited to keep trying to make this a better channel worthy of all the support. Some really exciting things are coming, but these little outro announcements are recorded ridiculously far in advance. It is February 14th right now. This video is not going to be out for almost 2 months, so if you want to stay up to date on all of the current exciting developments, please keep your eyes on the community tab so that you can always be up to date on all of the latest happenings. I'll let you go for now though, I need to get working on Sonic CD, but Supersonic says thanks for watching.